You know, I think it's always important to make the distinction between optimism and hope. So, the danger of optimism, I think, is that it can become a form of complacency, where you say, things are moving in the right direction. Don't worry, we're richer, we're wealthier, we're healthier than we were 30, 50, or 200 years ago. So, just enjoy the ride. Things are going fine. And indeed, it is true that we are, the world is in a much better place when you look at metrics such as health or how rich we are or the decline of extreme poverty than 30 or 50 years ago. But, that has gone hand in hand with the wrecking of the planet. So there are things to be genuinely worried or even terrified about as well. Now, hope is about the possibility of change. It's about recognizing that things can be different, that there's nothing inevitable about the way we've structured our economy and society today. That's why, to me, studying history and hope are fundamentally connected, because history is all about showing that things don't have to be this way. They can be radically worse or radically better. For Germans in the 1920s or the 1930s, it was unimaginable that a dictator like Hitler would rise and all the kind of terrible things that would happen after that. That was unimaginable. But it was also unimaginable once that we would abolish slavery, implement a representative democracy, try to achieve equal rights for men and women, build a welfare state. All of these, every milestone of civilization was once a utopian fantasy. And that's why I think history is probably the most subversive of all the social sciences, because just studying history gives you this feeling, well, things can be different. Now, indeed, it's very tempting to see these cycles. History doesn't repeat itself, as they say, it rhymes. But yeah, it's hard not to get the feeling that 2020 might be a crucial year or a turning point. If we zoom out a little bit and we look at the history of the 20th century, what you see is that after the Second World War, everyone, or a lot of people, were Keynesians, followers of the British economist John Maynard Keynes, and believed that we needed to build a big state with healthcare for everyone, a welfare state. And that was sort of the prevailing ideology of you could say, social democracy in the 50s, the 60s, and the early 70s. Then that obviously all broke down with stagflation and the oil crises, and we saw the rise of neoliberalism, the rise of Thatcher and Reagan. And that ideology has been here for 40, 50 years. It's been incredibly dominant and effective. And as I said, it seemed to be like a zombie that just didn't want to die. But now I really do have the feeling that the end of neoliberalism is here and that something is about to replace it. There's been such an exciting shift in economics and in sociology. There have been this rise of a new generation of economists. So, for example, the new French economists such as Thomas Piketty, who's done this tremendous work on inequality. You've got a lot of amazing new female economists such as Mariana Mazzucato, the Italian economist, who pointed out how important the state is in achieving innovation. People like Stephanie Kelton, who basically said, well, just print more money if you have a deficit. And that would have sounded, crazy 10 years ago, but it's actually taken very seriously today. People like Kate Raworth, who say, well, we should see the economy we shouldn't obsess only about growth, but actually look at how we can move towards a more circular economy. I can go on for a very long time here, but we're living in a very exciting intellectual moment. And maybe this crisis will give us the opportunity that these ideas that used to be on the margins can actually start moving into the mainstream.
Neoliberalism didn't arise in a vacuum. It was a set of conscious plans that were developed over many decades. And then when the moment arose, when the crisis happened in the 70s, they were well poised to come forward and put forward an alternative agenda, which then became the dominant ideology which overtook Keynesianism. We're at that moment now. We're at a moment of crisis where if we have a set of policy opportunities or prescriptions to come forward with, we can take advantage of this moment and use it to, harness this beast, tame the beast and pull it back into line. I think we have got a whole bunch of ideas out there in the world, and what I wanted to do with my book was to gather them together so that we could say, this is what we're protesting for, not just what we're protesting against. And I think what we need to do is realise how empowered we are as individuals and as citizens, but that we can only have impact when we work collectively. And I think one of the key things that we can do is figure out how we can be active citizens in the time between elections. We think that if we show up every 3 or 4 years and vote for one team blue, team red, team green, you name it, then they'll represent our interests in the various levels of government. I don't think that's going to do enough in the speed of the cycles, of news cycles and policy that we work in today. So what I'd ask is that everyone become a YIMBY. So there's this idea of a NIMBY, a person who says not in my backyard, a person who opposes change. What we actually need are more people who say yes in my backyard, people who stand forward, come forward and proactively call on their elected representatives to take positive steps and who put forward positive proposals or band together in support of positive proposals to make that change. So it's a process of becoming active citizens because there are more of us than those corporations or individuals who have an undemocratic influence.